Yo, let's get what's next up. Title. Let's get it, nigga.
Number 9. Victorian chimney sweeps. Imagine being 4 years old and your parents selling you to a stranger. That stranger then forces you to climb up narrow, scorching hot chimneys filled with toxic soot. The chimneys were often only 9 inches wide. That's about the size of an iPad. These kids would have to wiggle their way up there, using their elbows and knees to climb. When they got stuck, the master sweep would light a fire under them. But getting burned alive wasn't even the worst part of being a chimney sweep. These kids would develop something called sweeps cancer. The soot would get into every crack and crevice of their bodies. It would cause tumors to grow in places you really don't want tumors growing. They climbed naked because clothes would get caught on the bricks. These kids were basically human brushes, scraping their bare skin against hot bricks covered in cancer-causing soot. Parents would actually compete to get their kids these positions, because in Victorian England, dying from cancer while climbing naked up chimneys was considered better than starving to death on the streets. Number 8. Gunflint nappers. Gunflint nappers in the 1700s and 1800s had one of the deadliest jobs in history. These workers made the tiny pieces of flint for flintlock rifles, the ones where flint strikes metal to make sparks. When they chipped away at flint, it created microscopic, razor-sharp silica dust. These particles would get into their lungs and start cutting up the tissue like thousands of tiny knives. Their bodies would try to heal by creating scar tissue, but more dust kept coming in, creating more cuts and more scars. Eventually, their lungs became so scarred they stopped working. They called this condition napper's rot, because they could feel their lungs rotting away. 7 out of 8 nappers died from this, an 87% death rate. That's higher than being a soldier in World War I. The dust was so fine they couldn't even see it in normal light. Only when sunlight streamed through workshop windows could they see clouds of glittering dust, like deadly fairy sparkles floating in the air. The average napper started working at age 12 or 13. By their late 30s, they were usually dead or dying, but they kept working because the pay was good and their families needed to eat. Number 7. Steeplejacks. These guys were industrial acrobats who
Yo, bro, I'm hearing so much jobs like from fucking the old days, man, or from history. Cause in history, bro, I forgot I got a cut in my hand. Cause in history, we must have realized that a lot of things were really fucking bad, dude. Like really bad. So it's not surprising that. So it's like low-key not even surprising that I'm hearing about jobs from like the olden days. But you had cheat with children's parents sold their children away to slave, basically. Um, Motherfuckers who made flint from guns. It's like welding, and they're basically just inhaling. They're in there inhaling whatever residue comes from the thing. So of course, it's gonna give them some type of like.
fixed tall chimneys and church spires without any safety equipment. Some of these chimneys were over 400 feet high, taller than the Statue of Liberty. They climbed that height with nothing but a rope, no safety harness, no backup line, just pure nerve. The death rates were so high that steeplejacks would write their wills before starting a new job. Steeplejacks would often work drunk, not because
That's just a recipe for disaster,
they
man.
were irresponsible, but because alcohol helped them stay warm and calm their nerves. In the 1800s, 1 in 3 steeplejacks died on the job. The most dangerous part was demolition work. They would knock down massive chimneys by removing bricks from the bottom until the whole thing collapsed. The job was so dangerous that insurance companies wouldn't even cover them. If you were a steeplejack, you were completely uninsurable. Number 6. The railroad brakeman. The wind is whipping at your clothes. Rain is making the metal surface slick as ice. You need to run from car to car on top of a moving train, turning heavy brake wheels by hand. One slip and you're falling between the cars to certain death. This was the life of a railroad brakeman in the 1800s. This wasn't some daredevil stunt job. This was a normal, everyday position that thousands of men worked, and about 1 in 5 of them would die on the job. When the engineer needed to slow down, he'd blow the whistle. That was your signal to start running across the tops of the moving train cars. Each car had its own brake wheel that needed to be turned by hand. Miss a car, and the whole train might derail. They also had to couple cars using the link and pin system, standing between 2 massive train cars, holding a heavy metal pin. As the cars came together, they had to drop the pin through 2 metal loops to connect them. Time it wrong, and you're crushed between several tons of steel. Many brakemen would write their names and addresses on pieces of paper. They'd pin these to their shirts so their bodies could be identified and sent home to their families.
The
It wasn't
fuck?
until 1893 that the government finally forced them to start using safer equipment. Number 5. The matchstick makers. Imagine biting into an apple and your entire jaw starts glowing in the dark. For matchstick makers in the 1800s, this was just another day at work. Back then, matches were made using white phosphorus, a substance that was both toxic and highly flammable. It didn't kill quickly. Instead, it would slowly eat away at your jawbone, similar to how rust destroys metal. The workers would first notice a toothache, then their teeth would start falling out, one by one. The phosphorus would make their jawbones rot away while they were still alive. Doctors called it phossy jaw, as the bone would literally decompose, creating a hole in their face that kept growing larger. The rotting bone produced a stench like meat left to rot in summer heat. The companies knew exactly what was happening. They decided it was cheaper to let workers die than use safer materials. Workers' jaws would glow so bright at night, they could read by the light of their own rotting faces. The only treatment was surgical removal of the entire jaw without proper anesthesia. Workers endured this torture simply because factory owners wanted to save pennies per match. Number 4. The mule scavengers. 4-year-old children crawled under massive machines that could crush them in an instant. These were the mule scavengers in the textile mills of the Industrial Revolution. Their job was to collect bits of cotton that fell under spinning mules, which were these massive machines used to make thread. The factory owners wouldn't turn the machines off because children's lives were cheaper than lost production time. These kids had to time their movements perfectly with the machine. The spinning mule moved back and forth like a giant metal wave. When it moved forward, the kids had about 20 seconds to scramble underneath, grab whatever cotton they could find, and get out before the machine came back. If they were too slow, the machine wouldn't stop for anything in its way. The space under these machines was so tiny that only children could fit. These kids worked 14 to 16-hour days in the dark, breathing in cotton dust, constantly playing a deadly game with the machine.
I'm telling you, man, the residue, bro, or the residue from whatever industrial machine will always cause some type of internal disease, whether it be cancer, something with your blood, or fucking with your literally anything in your internal, any one of your internal organs.
Inspector wrote about finding half a child under a machine. Factory owners defended the practice by saying the children were nimble and quick. They never mentioned the ones who weren't quick enough. Number 3. Mercury miners. Every breath these miners took was slowly killing them. These weren't high-tech facilities with safety gear and ventilation systems, just dark, damp tunnels where the air itself was their enemy. When miners heated cinnabar ore to extract mercury, it released invisible toxic vapors. These vapors would seep into their bodies with every breath. First came the shakes. Their hands would tremble uncontrollably. Then their teeth would start falling out. But what came next was much worse. Their minds would start to deteriorate. They'd get confused, angry, and start seeing things that weren't there. In Huancavelica, Peru, they called it the Mine of Death. About 1 in 4 miners would die within a few years of starting work. The survivors became toxic to be around. Their sweat contained mercury. Their breath contained mercury. Even their corpses were dangerous to handle. The Spanish Empire built their economy on these dying miners because mercury was essential for processing silver. And despite all this history, illegal mercury mining operations still exist today in places like Indonesia and Peru. Number 2. Oil well shooters. Imagine carrying hundreds of pounds of nitroglycerin, the most unstable explosive known to man, in your truck while bouncing down dirt roads. One wrong move, one tiny bump, and you're painting the landscape red. This was the daily reality for oil well shooters in the early 1900s. Their job was to lower this extremely unstable explosive down into oil wells, to blast open new pockets of oil. They were dangling a bomb that could go off from the slightest shock, down a deep, dark hole, using nothing but a rope. The pay was incredible, $100 a day, equivalent to about $3,000 today, but most shooters didn't live long enough to spend their money. The average career lasted only 3 years before ending an explosion. When a shooter blew himself up, they usually couldn't find enough pieces to fill a lunchbox. The explosion would literally vaporize them. Most shooters worked alone because if something went wrong, there was no point in killing 2 people instead of 1. Number 1. Shipbreakers. These workers take apart the world's biggest ships with nothing but basic tools and their bare hands. These ships are like floating skyscrapers laid on their side. each one packed with enough steel to build 50,000 cars. The ships are full of leftover fuel that can explode at any time. Workers cut through metal with torches, never knowing if the next section is hiding a pocket of explosive gas. They climb these metal mountains with no safety gear, balancing on steel beams slick with oil. One wrong step means falling several stories onto jagged metal below. These old ships are basically floating toxic waste dumps. They are packed with asbestos, lead paint, and chemicals that would make a hazmat team run for cover. The workers breathe this stuff in all day, every day. In the 1980s, workers found 2 forgotten nuclear reactors inside Soviet ships they were breaking down. Experts estimate 1 in every 1,000 workers dies each year. This job still exists today. Right now, someone in Bangladesh or India is climbing up the rusty side of a massive ship, hoping they make it home tonight. That's all for today.
A lot of these jobs took place during the industrial times. So hence is why as to why I say old days. A lot involved, bro. Child labor was real. Now I see the motherfuckers don't play about that them child labor laws because that shit was real. A lot of people are dying to just fucking residue and other things as well. Also, nitroglycerin. I've heard of that when I was a kid. Forgot what it fucking meant though. But VID though, and Chill Dude explains. On that, I'm gonna catch up, boys. Be easy.